My name is Joe Farwell. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer of the Grand River Conservation Authority, and we have lots of staff around here. Our superintendent of the park is right here in the front row, Brad Dixon. If you want to know more about the park, talk to him afterward. But we're here for an announcement from the Minister of Natural Resources. So in a few minutes, I'm going to introduce Minister Catherine McGarry. She was first elected to the legislature in 2014 as an MPP for Cambridge. She currently serves as the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, and was previously the Parliamentary Assistant to the Ministry of Transportation. Catherine has been a care coordinator in the community and a nurse for 30 years. She's very active in our community, and particularly as an advocate for health care and cultural heritage. She's a founding member of the Hospice of Waterloo Region and the past president of Heritage Cambridge. Catherine received the YWCA Women of Distinction Award in 2009 and a Bernice Adams Memorial Award in 2011 for her community service. So I'd like to welcome the Honourable Catherine McGarry to the podium.
Well, thank you very much, Joe, for that kind introduction. And what he didn't say was I have worked quite closely with GRCA as a volunteer and just an advocate and a strong supporter for many, many years. And thank you to everybody for putting up with the rain this morning and making sure that we have a good place to be this morning. I'm also delighted to be joined by Rob Keane, the Chief Executive Officer of Forests Ontario. And again, thank you, Joe, the Chief Administrative Officer of the Grand River Conservation Authority, and the rest of you that have come out this morning. I just wanted to start out to recognize that Guelph is located on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples dating back countless generations. And I want to show my respect for their contributions and recognize the role of treaty making in what is now Ontario. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they are still relevant today. Climate change has been called the great moral challenge of our generation. Ontario's fight against climate change includes the commitments outlined in our Climate Change Action Plan, our cap-and-trade system, and more. If you think back even 5-10 years ago, the general public was not talking about climate change. Certain organizations were, certainly the conservation authorities were, but the general public weren't. You can't look at any media outlet today without seeing several articles on some of the issues that we are facing today with climate change. Certainly, I believe that the public's awareness is continuing to grow. In talking about the cap-and-trade system that we're very proud of in Ontario, we are very fortunate to have funds that are being raised in the cap-and-trade auctions that go into the greenhouse gas reduction account. This money is then being used to meet the commitments in the Climate Change Action Plan that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help us move towards a low carbon economy. So today, I'm really thrilled to be here to highlight some of the initiatives that are being funded through the account from the first carbon auction. First, I'd like to discuss our 50 million tree program. Tree planting is an important tool in mitigating the effects of climate change. The 50 million tree program was launched in 2008 to expand forest cover in the province on private lands. The goal of the program is to get 50 million trees in the ground by year 2025, an action that will sequester 6.6 million tons of carbon by year 2050. So we're pleased to be working with Forests Ontario, which is delivering the program on the province's behalf. And I think many of the times that Rob and I have been out planting trees, it's been at least drizzling or raining. So I guess this is kind of now tradition. But great progress has been made so far, and we're about halfway to our goal already. More than 4,000 landowners have participated, planting more than 22.5 million trees and creating approximately 12,000 hectares of new forest. That's impressive. As a key commitment under Ontario's Climate Change Action Plan, the number of trees that will be planted within the boundaries of urban municipalities as part of the 50 million tree program will be doubled to 2 million trees, and we're well on the way there. The 50 million tree program will be receiving $380,000 in greenhouse gas reduction account funding to strengthen our tree planting program efforts in urban municipalities to meet our goals. So that's great news. Earlier this year, because it's Ontario's 150, and we felt that we needed to really look to some of the legacy programs that many of our community members could participate in, so we issued the Green Leaf Challenge. We created the challenge again to honor the province's 150th anniversary. And so we've asked people to match the trees planted under the 50 million tree program this year, 1-to-1. Forests Ontario has a tree counter online where Ontarians can report the number of trees that they've planted. I've got a few that I haven't put on the counter yet, so we're a few ahead on my own property. But our citizens can learn about the local tree planting events and find out how to support the cause through Forests Ontario. Tree planting efforts, both large and small, contribute to the fight against climate change. And it's interesting when I'm out at community events to talk about what trees are all about to the children that are often there to help me to plant a tree. Whatever community I've been going into, I can't really resist trying to find a tree that I can have a bunch of children gathered around to try and plant. And in particular, one in Thunder Bay in front of a school in the middle of the summer, we still had a crowd of children, even though that they weren't at school. And they were incredibly informed about what trees do, usually more than the adults, about what trees do to mitigate the effects of climate change. So I know that this program is working. And if you want to participate in the program, I know of somebody, again, who would be highly happy to help you to go to greenleafchallenge.ca, and that's Rob Keane. We also need to have a better understanding of greenhouse gas emissions as they relate to land use change, and forestry activities. That is why $750,000 in funding from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Account will also be supporting the development and implementation of an Ontario land use carbon inventory. That is great news. Without these funds, we would be struggling to try and put funds into it. So $750,000 in funding to support an Ontario land use carbon inventory. This initiative will help to assess the potential of agriculture, forestry, and other land uses to emit, remove, and store carbon. In the long term, such an inventory and a greater awareness of land use carbon could help inform land use planning and resource management decisions from a climate change perspective, and that's something we all need to be part of. These two initiatives are just some of the ways we're using the funds raised by our cap and trade auctions. Ontario continues to be committed to ensuring that every dollar in the greenhouse gas reduction account is invested in actions that reduce greenhouse gas pollution, creates jobs, and helps people and businesses shift to a low carbon economy. Thanks so much for your attention today, and I see that we will be planting a tree later. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That's the torch. Thank you. Thank you, Minister McGarry. Now I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce Rob Keane. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Forests Ontario since 2014. He's a registered professional forestry who founded forestry consulting business after graduating from U of T in 1982. Sorry for mentioning that, Rob. He's worked in many facets of the forestry industry, and he provided forestry service to landowners, developed forest management plans on Crown and private lands. He's conducted wood supply and feasibility studies, led forest audits and Forestry Stewardship Council, and he's fulfilled many individual contracts in the silviculture business. So Rob, I'll hand the mic over to you to say a few words from Trees Ontario.
Thanks very much, Joe. It really is a pleasure to be here this morning, and Minister McGarry, I would like to thank you for your leadership in making this initiative possible, and that is, of course, the additional funding to support the 50 million tree program. We have a long relationship with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry in the delivery of the 50 million program, and it's through their support that has provided us and our many partners, including GRCA, who's one of our more significant partners, but nevertheless, the ability to carry out forest restoration efforts across the province. And I'm proud to say, as Minister McGarry noted, that we're well within our target of reaching 50 million trees by 2025. With the global recognition of the importance of forests established at the recent Paris Climate Change Conference, initiatives like the 50 million tree program have placed Ontario ahead of the curve in proactively addressing climate change. As well, the pledge of additional funding of the 50 million tree program from the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change Greenhouse Gas Reduction account reaffirms the government's commitment to support tree planting programs and further acknowledges the vital role that our forests play in addressing climate change. This comes at a time when we need to be more vigilant than ever with our tree planting efforts. Certainly we have seen the challenges increasing, as certainly last year we had significant drought, and this year, significant rain. And today is a perfect example of that, where we see this increased amount of precipitation actually impacting our abilities to get trees planted on the ground. In fact, I was just talking with Nathan Munn today, who's our contact here at GRCA, and indicating that, they couldn't get machines on the site. They had to put some of those plants into hand plant. So these are the kinds of things that are making it more and more difficult to get trees established on our landscape. But we have to maintain our vigilance in ensuring that we do get those trees planted on the landscape and ensure that we increase the amount of forest cover, especially here in Southern Ontario, where we do have a highly fragmented landscape. And one of the ways to address climate change is through the tree planting efforts that we have, and of course all the other values that those forests will provide to ourselves, to society, and of course to the economy. This increased support allows Forests Ontario and our partners to engage more landowners, a vital contributor to our tree planting efforts, so that we now can continue to work towards healthy, abundant, and sustainably managed forests across Ontario. In fact, it's been noted that we do have the best managed forests here in Ontario, and we should all, as Ontarians, be very proud of that. So Minister McGarry, I look forward to working with you in the future, and again, thanks to you and MOECC for the continued contributions to the 50 million program, and of course the additional funding that you've provided. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Rob. Well, thank you, Rob. I'll have a few concluding remarks then. About 200 years ago, 85% of this watershed was covered in trees, and that dropped to around 5% with the clearing for agriculture and for urban areas back in 1900. And we're proud to say we've got it back up around 19%. And that's moving toward a healthier and healthier watershed. Watersheds respond to the land around them. So what's good for the land is good for the watershed. In 2017, we planted 175,000 trees, and a number of them were planted on the 40-acre site over at the Guelph Rotary Forest, just outside the gates of this park. Our goal is to have 60,000 trees planted in that site by 2020. And since its inception, the GRCA has planted 27 million trees. We really look forward to continued action in the tree planting front. It's great to see such two great partners here in the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and Forest Ontario. And I know the Minister and Rob will be around afterward to talk one-on-one if you want to have a few minutes to spend with them. But for now, I guess we'll say thank you to all our guests, and we'll go outside and plant a tree while the rain's here. So thanks very much for coming.